Alrighty, I know this is kind of late in the season to do something like this. Oh, here's your builds, here's this, here's that, but fucking knows. Maybe someone will find it useful. So I'm going to go over in this video essentially what, if you have like two-piece from T29 from Vault or T30 from Aberrus, if you have no pieces at all, like if you're just fresh new character, if you have 4 set, that's kind of what I'm going to go over here, and I'll put the different builds in the description of the video and those codes so you can use them. So first and foremost, let's go to if you're running T29, right? If you have all gear from last season, you're just picking the game back up, you're going to run something like this. T29, because of the sudden death bonus, obviously you want all of the execute talents. Sudden death keeps proccing over and over again. You hit execute, you're doing your thing. It's the same shit as last season, so that's what you're going to be looking for. But as you get geared as things, and as you get tier of the next tier, well, what do you do? What do you change? So once you get 2 pieces of the next tier, I would transition over to something like this, which is instead of running a point in sudden death, because you have lost that 4-piece sudden death proc bonus, I just swap it over to hack and slash. Because you have less procs of sudden death, your rotation, you're gonna actually like literally run out of buttons to hit. So having hack and slash to gain charges of raging blowback is just, it's gonna be good. It's what I ran when I got 2-piece. You can run, like for this build here, this is 2-piece, but if you're just wanting to run the build in raid, you can run it like this. If you're just doing full single target, Roar is actually pretty close to Spear in terms of DPS when you're in, at least in a full BIS setup. I'm not sure of the exact variance of it with lesser setup of gear, but these are pretty interchangeable, just depending on your preference. And then obviously, if you're doing Mythic Plus, you can take like Stormbolt and where's it? Take like that. You can take Stormbolt, and then normally, I think some people take a point out of Barbaric Training, and you can run something like this instead. But as always, I just kind of prefer this in terms of what you're going to be running for Mythic Plus most of the time. You're kind of locked out of some choices, but we'll get to that in a second because you don't have the new tier bonus. But once again, really quick, if you just want like Stormbolt and then Intimidating Shout's kind of whatever, I'll be honest. It's a good AoE stop, but if you just want Stormbolt, just run something like this. You just make that point swap over. Now, here's where we get to the fun part. At the start of the season, this is kind of what I was running as my setup for Mythic Plus. And you can run this too if you prefer having a Fear instead of a Stun. But this kind of evolved a little bit over into what is the new Shockwave Mythic Plus setup, where you can actually take Shockwave as a DPS gain compared to Uproar and basically compared to Uproar and Cruel Strikes is what the main difference is. You may be asking, well, if we're running this Bloodborne talent, why isn't Uproar that good that it's actually doing that much more damage? And the realistic answer is because Uproar desyncs with everything. It desyncs from your avatar. Sometimes you don't have your recklessness back up to pop with. It just desyncs, and when it desyncs, it doesn't do as much damage, and then it just does the same or more damage when you've synced it up with not only something like your avatar, but with the new trinket available for us in Mythic Plus, Vial of Animated Blood. It's really good, because you just sync everything up to that minute 30 window and just blast. So I would recommend running the new version of the build we have currently, which is the Shockwave variant. And the Shockwave variant is super, super nice because compared to a minute and a half for Intimidating Shout, Shockwave's only 40 seconds and it's uncapped. So it does a crazy, I wouldn't say a crazy amount of damage, but if you sim, I think if you sim like Dungeon Cleave or like 5-target Cleave, this Shockwave setup actually does a little bit more damage compared to the Stormbolt Intimidating Shout variant. So you still keep both of your stops. Your AoE stop is now on a shorter cooldown and better, and you do a little more damage. The main reason for this is because after losing the T29 set bonus effects, which were all mainly about execute damage, execute and execute damage, right, from sudden death. This talent doesn't really do that much for you because we already get plenty of crit from our gear and from recklessness, which we're going to have up a lot of the time anyway. So it devalues the crit, and because of the loss of the set bonus, it also devalues the execute damage, which we don't really use that much in dungeons comparatively. It also gives you another 5% stamina with 0 buffs. In this setup, I have 607k health. That's a lot of fucking health. And it is very useful to have a lot of health, especially when you're doing higher keys. So this is what the general Mythic Plus setup I would recommend. You will be DRing your stuns. So like, let's say you're playing with like a Demon Hunter or a Shaman who is dropping Capacitor Totem that's stunning everything, and the Demon Hunter is also using Chaos Nova to stun everything. You might be going, well, it might not provide that much value, but the realistic thing is basically it's an AoE stop, just like Intimidating Shout. Intimidating Shout breaks instantly anyway, and it does damage and can crit. So essentially, you're just gaining a better AoE stop that does damage. So 100% would recommend trying out Shockwave. It's a bit weird at first. Shockwave is also a frontal based on your character, as you can see here. So you do have to be facing the correct direction, and where you want a Shockwave, you can't just be kind of willy-nilly over here, kind of hitting stuff, walking around. You actually have to make sure you're facing where you want to hit it with. Not that big of a deal, but something to keep in mind. If we're talking about Raid, however, there's 2 setups that I use. Oh, Shockwave's on. Okay, well, we have to wait a glorious 10 seconds because I decided that putting an ability on cooldown that I didn't have for the other specs to show different specs was a good idea. So now, here we are. It's my fault. But the cooldown is so short, unlike Intimidating Shout, that we can swap right away. God damn, that's terrible. So on a fight that has ads, or a fight that you're actually doing a lot of damage to ads, if you're doing like Heroic Skarn, what is it? If you have a lot of grips in, you can technically use this for something like... Heroic Skarn. I forget. Scale Commander Sarkareth is the last boss. So you can technically use this on Sarkareth. You can use this on Skarn. You can use this on Assault, primarily, is what I use this on. You could take Wrecking Throw for Assault, technically, if you wanted to switch a point around to do more damage to that shield, but I don't really think it matters. But if you're doing a fight, and it's a raid fight where it has ads, this is a pretty good setup for it. But a lot of the fights are single target, so this is where we go to our single target build, obviously. And the single target has a couple things you can do with it, depending on your preference. First and foremost, it is this, Vicious Contempt. And Vicious Contempt can be swapped with Sudden Death. They're pretty similar DPS-wise, but I prefer Vicious Contempt for a singular reason only. My brain is stupid, and I'm still used to the T29 set somewhat. Because in the T29 set, because your Sudden Death procs so much, you would want to use it on cooldown with all the buffs you're getting execute damage here, right? Because of the crit, you're getting basically execute good in the last tier, right? Execute was good. But now, with execute being deprioritized and you're still using it inside the execute window of 35%, running Sudden Death not running Sudden Death makes it easier for me, because instead of having Sudden Death pop up on my screen and using it, I don't have to care about it, and I can still gain the same amount of DPS value, while also trying not to manage Sudden Deaths, Raging Blows, Onslaughts while within a Recklessness window. It's just one less thing to think about, basically. So I like running Vicious Contempt because it's one less thing to think about in an easy class already, and it just lets me be brainless and focus more on the fight and less on what I'm doing. So if you prefer the extra procs that you get from Sudden Death, it's basically the same or very similar in DPS, so feel free to just take a point out of Vicious Contempt and put it in here instead. But that's kind of it for these different builds that you can use. I will put the little alt code that you can import these builds with. So you just go to import, and you can just copy paste those in there. You can mess around, see what you like, see what you don't. Hopefully this is useful to somebody. Some people it might be, some people it might not. Yeah, that's kind of it, man. I'll throw up some like Mythic Plus footage on like in another video. I think I have like a 21 Brackenhide saved that I can throw up there, so you can watch it. That footage is also of the Mythic Plus, the Shockwave variant, which I still stand by. So once again, I'll throw those in the description. Thanks for watching. Hopefully these are useful to you, and have a good day. Bye-bye.